Elizabeth II Golden Jubilee Medal for his significant contributions to his profession. In 2010, he was awarded the degree of Doctor of Laws, honoris causa, by the Capilano University, British Columbia. Finally, Dr. Cappon is Senior Fellow at the Graduate School of Public and International Affairs at University of Ottawa. And as a research unit in science education and environmental education, I think there's a very close link here we can make because Dr. Cappon has a background in science as a doctor, as a medical doctor. So we're very proud to present him today, and I hope you have a very good conference and you will learn a lot, and this contribution will help you with your future research. Thank you.
Une introduction. Je suis très heureux d'être là. En fait, je ne pouvais pas refuser parce que j'ai maintenant une nomination à l'Université d'Ottawa. Alors évidemment, ça va de soi que je sois là aujourd'hui. As mentioned, I'll do this presentation in English and take questions in French as they come. And the slides will be in French, so we can follow along in both languages. What I'm going to try to do in the next 50 minutes, if you have enough patience to hear it for 50 minutes, is really a review of what the Canadian Council on Learning has concluded from 7 years of research, 7 years of work on national education and learning. I'm saying learning because, of course, learning is much more than formal education. Learning is much more than what goes on in the classroom. The Canadian Council on Learning was founded to give some sense to learning across the life cycle, lifelong learning, and to be a component, to be a catalyst to lifelong learning, not just in the classroom. And so our work reflects the fact that we had an interest in every aspect of learning, from early childhood through primary and secondary education, through tertiary education, to adult learning, to learning at the workplace, and Aboriginal learning as well. I'm going to be skipping a lot of the slides because I can't give you any more than an overview in each of these areas. But I'll begin by saying that it's obvious to most people in modern society that lifelong learning is a key to national prosperity. And you see some quotations from various people here, including the OECD, which show that this is pretty well internationally accepted, that prosperity and social cohesion, that's what I did, really go hand in hand with strong learning systems. So when we think about Canada, l'essentiel de notre propos today is to present a picture which is mixed. When I think about learning, not just education in the classroom, Canada has done somewhat well in the past, but the real question is not the past. The question is, are we setting conditions to succeed in the future? When you think about the research that you might be interested in, I would like you to think about it in those ways. When you look at CCL's website, you'll find all kinds of research that's been done, all kinds of publications. We've supported many hundreds of researchers in Canada over the last 7 years. I would like people to take up that question, are we setting the conditions for success in the future in each of the phases of learning, and look at the result of the research that we've either done ourselves or we have funded. The short answer from our 7 years of work overall is that Canada lacks a coherent approach to learning, what I call a learning architecture. We're not well organized, we're very poorly organized, and that is a problem because societies which are better organized will do better than we. And so we feel a sense of urgency about changing many of the aspects of Canadian learning systems as we know it today. I speak of Canada's learning paradoxes because there's a paradox means a contradiction between what you think of the reality is and what the actual reality is, or between what you declare to be so and what you actually, and how you actually behave. There's such a distinction. And when we look at the record that Canada has in learning, and we look at our current processes and our current actions, it looks as if we're not doing what we say. We value education, we value learning, but we don't act on that value. So illustrations of that are in early childhood. Canadians, we know from our survey work, CCL survey work, understand the importance of early childhood education, but we don't act on it nationally. We, in K-12 education, primary, secondary education, when standardized testing internationally began, we were scoring very well, but we're declining relative to other countries over time. Those of you who might have seen a press release by the Council of Ministers of Education, my former place of work before I went to CCL today, on standardized testing across the provinces in mathematics, science, and reading, you might have noted that there's been no improvement, in fact, despite diminished performance over the last several years. And so Canada is, although K-12 education, our students, at least at secondary school level, were outperforming the OECD average. We're losing that advantage progressively over time. And there are reasons for that, and I'll come to that. When we look at more paradoxes, you look at higher education, and you see a lot of people go to universities, community colleges, polytechnics, and yet literacy levels among adults in Canada are low. 42% of Canadian adults are below the internationally recognized standard for participation in a knowledge society. Doesn't mean 42% are illiterate. It means they're not fully participatory economically and socially in a knowledge society and a knowledge economy. 42% of Canadian adults who are working. In adult learning, Canadians get lifelong learning. They understand what it is and why it's important, but workplace participation in learning and skills upgrading is low, and there are reasons for that, and we'll come to that as well. So overall, if you think about Canada's learning paradoxes, there is what I would call an educational ethos in Canada. Canadians, I think, are united in valuing learning, but we are falling short of our potential across the life cycle, and these are some of the ways in which we are falling behind and falling below the potential that we have. The main reason, overall, for which we're not doing as well as one would like and one would think, and for which we're going to fall behind other countries, is because of lack of coordination, lack of ability to make policy between provincial and federal levels, between the private sector and the public sector. And that's an area that requires a lot more research. We require a lot more research on how we can actually better work between the public and the private sector, how other countries are organizing themselves between levels of government to articulate policy and use policy that is a framework for the country and yet doesn't get in the way of local decision. There is, by the way, a very interesting group at the University of Victoria, which looks at how the European Union functions in its way of working across education, but also welfare and employment. And it's interesting that the university that's furthest removed from Europe is the University of Canada, which is most active in looking at European models. Very important to look at European models because of the similarities politically between the sovereign nature of the European states and the sovereign nature of Canadian provinces that are able to make decisions about education internally. I'm going to talk about the positive developments, and then I'm going to talk about the troubling trends in learning across the life course. So first, the positive developments. Our research finds that Canadians will make sacrifices to promote learning. Certainly find that among parents. The deficiencies we have in learning are not because we don't have good educators, because we actually do at every level of education. Any success, I would argue, that we've had in education has been despite our structures and mechanisms, not because of them. So one of the things I dislike is when the failings of Canadian learning are laid at the door of educators and the schools, when really the problems are structural and societal and have nothing to do with the strength and the values of our educators themselves. And if we're not doing as well as we should, it's not because we don't spend the money. We do. We spend more money on education than most countries in the OECD, particularly on post-secondary education. And Canada does very well in terms of integrating immigrants, better than most other countries. Our system is more egalitarian than
egalitarian nature of the system and the integration of immigrants in particular is a characteristic of Canadian education that is most admired in other countries in the OECD. Troubling trends across the life cycle that we should worry about. We don't have lifelong learning policies for Canada. Those low levels of literacy are not being addressed. We have very few data and no measures and indicators that are national at all. And we are poorly coordinated between public and private, between the federal government and the provincial government and our local government. So we don't have the education and learning structures we need to want to do it. This next table is an example of what we don't have in comparison with what some other countries do have. Those other countries being federal states, or in the case of the European Union, a transnational political entity. It's important for you to know, if you don't know already, I hope you do, that Canada is the only country in the world that doesn't have a central government Ministry of Education or Secretary of Education. The only country out of the 200-odd countries in the world that doesn't have a Ministry of Education. And when I represented Canada internationally at so many meetings when I was at the Council of Ministers, it was always a source of embarrassment to try to explain to people from other countries how we were organized, because we don't really know ourselves. But one thing you can do, if you're a federal state, like Australia, like Germany, like the United States, like Switzerland, you can give yourselves processes or structures or mechanisms to coordinate among levels of government. These are the things in post-secondary education you would want to have. You would want to have a major national review every few years. You would want to have system-wide objectives that are shared by the levels of government. You'd want to have your funding, your money aligned with national priorities. You would want to have national quality assurance agencies in place, and you want to have mechanisms of federal and state planning. That's what you would want in it, and what Lucien Bouchard would call a real country. If you look across, then what other countries have, you see that they are real countries in the sense of really acting like one. Australia, you can see, has all of these mechanisms in place. And Australia is a good example because it has the same constitution that Canada has in terms of education being a state right, not a federal government responsibility. And yet they have these mechanisms of coordination, which in Canada lack entirely. It was mentioned that I was at the Council of Ministers of Education, which is our substitute for a central government Ministry of Education, but it has its drawbacks because it's intergovernmental and it works by consensus, so it is slow. Okay, positive developments in early childhood and primary secondary education in Canada. We certainly understand why preschool is important, and there are some successful models of early childhood learning. Last week you might have seen the Mustard report on early childhood learning, which was the first index of early childhood learning performance by different provinces, and you might have seen that Quebec and Manitoba and PEI were doing better than other provinces in that index. But there are some successful models. The trouble is that the way we judge success is different in each province, and so it's not comparable among provinces. Not until the Mustard report came out last week, and that's a pretty basic index that we're using. In primary and secondary education, you can see what we're doing well in, particularly that our systems are egalitarian, much more so than other countries. And that, again, is, I think, the strength of primary and secondary education.